This one arrives with the scent of cold marsh water, a tale bound to a single night and a single choice, though its echoes have stretched far beyond their beginnings. It begins on Thanksgiving, a holiday meant for gratitude, for forgiveness, for gathering near those we love. Yet we humans are often at our most fragile on days when we believe we ought to be happy. When expectations rise, hidden fractures reveal themselves. A careless word, a misunderstanding, a storm is rolling in faster than we expect. Most have heard a version of this story. They know of a girl on a snowy bridge, a car that never stopped, and a ghost who wanders the marsh road when the year begins to lean toward winter. But they seldom know why she appears, or what unfinished sorrow holds her to the world she left behind. I know the truth. I watched it unfold, and I invite you to do the same, if you are willing to step onto that bridge with me, into the cold November night, where the wind carries a whisper of regret. Marsh Road had always been lonely in late November, even during gentle weather, though it rarely offered such kindness. The landscape stretched flat and raw between clusters of winter-bare trees, with cattails bending over narrow ditches and the dark ribbon of the river threading its quiet path beyond them. By late afternoon, a low ceiling of clouds had settled across the sky, the color of battered pewter. Snow drifted in thin, early flakes, like scouts of a greater force waiting just beyond the horizon. Clara Whitcombe walked quickly, though she did not yet realize how far she had come. The cold tugged at the hem of her coat, pushing against her legs and slipping under the collar to sting the sensitive skin beneath her hairline. Her breath curled in front of her, dissolving into the thickening air. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, both for warmth and to hold in the emotions still simmering after her argument with her mother. It had been a small thing at first, a fleeting disagreement over the holiday table, but the words had sharpened unexpectedly. Pride, frustration, and unspoken fears had tangled messily between them. Clara had turned away before she could say something unforgivable, slipping out the back door with her boots already half laced and tears threatening the corners of her eyes. She needed space. She needed the cold to clear her thoughts. She needed the storm to quiet the noise inside her mind. She walked without direction, letting the road decide for her. The sky darkened faster than she expected, the storm advancing with surprising speed. Sleet began to fall, tapping against her coat and the frozen patches of earth in crisp, staccato beats. She pulled her scarf tighter and kept moving. It was not until the bridge appeared through the veil of snow that Clara realized where her feet had taken her. Marsh Bridge stretched across the narrow river, its wooden planks slick with ice, and its railings rimed in a thin crust of frost. In summer, it was a quiet place, almost pretty, with lilies floating beneath and frogs croaking at dusk. Tonight it looked like the threshold to another world. Clara stepped onto it slowly. The river churned below, dark and unsettled beneath the storm. Wind scraped across the frozen cattails, bending them low. She paused at the center of the bridge and leaned against the railing, closing her eyes as the cold stung her cheeks. She tried to breathe past the knot of guilt that sat heavy in her chest. If she returned now, everything could still be mended. Her mother would forgive her. She knew that. But the shame felt like a weight she did not yet know how to carry. A faint glow appeared on the horizon. Headlights. Clara blinked, surprised at the relief that surged up her spine. A car meant warmth and safety. A ride home. A chance to end this night, before it became something her family would remember for the wrong reasons. She raised her hand. The car approached too quickly, its tires hissing across the slick road. Clara saw the moment the driver noticed her, saw the panicked twitch of the headlights as the vehicle veered a fraction to the left. She opened her mouth to call out, but the wind threw her voice aside. The car skidded. The tires lost their grip. The world blurred. The impact came like a blow from the sky itself. The railing splintered under the car's weight, wood snapping like brittle bones. Clara felt the strike of metal and ice, felt her breath leave in one sharp gasp. She was dimly aware of the driver's terrified shout, of the way the vehicle rocked dangerously close to the edge, of its tail lights flaring crimson in the storm. And then, impossibly, the driver sped away. Clara's body rolled toward the broken railing. The world around her tilted. The storm howled. The river waited. Snow began to gather, soft and indifferent, settling over her still form as Marsh Bridge held its breath and the night closed its hand around her. At the Whitcombe house, the storm sounded different. It did not feel mysterious or romantic as it sometimes did when the first snow came early. It felt heavy. It pressed its weight against the windows and crawled under the door with a chill that settled in the bones of everyone inside. The dinner plates still sat where they had been abandoned. A half-carved turkey cooled on the platter. Bowls of potatoes and stuffing stood like little monuments to a celebration that had been interrupted but not cleared away, as if someone might walk back in and say it was time for seconds. The smell of sage and roasted meat lingered in the air, now edged with something sharper. Worry carried its own scent. Annabel Whitcombe stood at the front window, fingers clutching the curtain so tightly that her knuckles had gone pale. She watched the storm swallow the road and counted the seconds between flashes of distant lightning and the low grumble of thunder. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, eyes wide, hair frizzed slightly from the heat of the kitchen and the dampness of the air. "She has been gone too long," she said quietly. Her husband, Thomas, sat at the table with his elbows resting against the wood and his hands folded as though in prayer, though no words formed on his lips. He had tried to be practical. He had told himself their daughter only needed a walk to cool her temper. He had watched teenagers his entire life. They burned quickly and cooled just as fast, but each minute that slipped past made his reasoning thinner. "The storm slowed her," he replied. "She is stubborn, but she is not foolish. She will come back." Annabel did not answer. She watched the wind drive sleet sideways across the yard. Somewhere beyond the barn and the trees, beyond fields now erased by falling snow, the old Marsh road wound toward the bridge. At the stairs, their youngest son, Daniel, sat halfway up, his chin resting on his knees. He had never liked conflict. Raised voices turned his stomach. The doors closing too hard made him flinch. He had heard the argument between his mother and sister. He had watched Clara step out into the dark with her coat half buttoned and her shoulders set. Now he listened to the storm and tried not to imagine what might be walking in it. By 8 o'clock, the worry had no more room to grow quietly. It spilled over. Annabel put on her coat with almost violent movements, tugging at the sleeves as if anger might keep her warm. "I am going to look for her," she said. Thomas rose and crossed the room. He placed his hands on her shoulders and tried to reason with her. The roads were slick. Visibility was poor. Clara would never forgive them if one of them slipped in the dark, trying to fetch her home from a foolish walk. She shook her head and stepped away. "You can stay here in case she returns," she said. "I cannot stand in this house while she is out there. Something feels wrong." The last sentence came out as a whisper. It cut through him more sharply than any shout. He went with her. Neighbors soon joined them. Small towns have a way of hearing trouble long before anyone knocks on the door. Flashlights appeared, bobbing along fences and across fields. Someone brought their dog, who pulled eagerly at the end of his leash, glad for the adventure, unaware of the reason. They called Clara's name into the storm. The wind broke their voices apart and scattered them across the frozen ground. Snow softened tracks as soon as they were made. Tire treads blurred, footprints filled. The earth became a rough patchwork of white and mud that refused to offer a clear story. Marsh Bridge sat further down the road, outer rail now broken, the storm covering the damage one delicate sheet at a time. No one reached it before the night claimed her. By midnight, the searchers had circled, backtracked, and begun to fail. The sheriff spoke gently of the hour, the conditions, the danger in continuing without rest or daylight. He promised that at first light, there would be more men, more dogs, a more coordinated search. Annabelle did not feel coordinated. She felt as if something inside her had been unmoored and left drifting. When she finally allowed herself to be led back to the house, the dining room looked wrong. The plates waited. The turkey remained as they had left it. The sight of it turned her stomach. On the table, Clara's place still held her glass and her folded napkin. The chair stood pushed back at a careless angle. Annabelle placed her hand against its back and felt the faint warmth where her daughter had been sitting only hours before. Her throat closed. Regret rose in her like a tide. She could not remember the exact words that had begun their argument. Only the feeling. Only the sudden sting of hearing her own voice grow sharp. Only the way Clara's eyes had flashed with wounded pride. If time could be rewound, she would have chosen her words more carefully. Outside, the storm drifted on. Beneath it, the river carried its new secret onward, dark and silent beneath the thin skin of ice that had begun to form around the bridge piers. Dawn arrived reluctantly, its light filtered through low clouds that had not yet finished with the town. The storm had quieted, but it had not truly ended. Sleet had given way to true snow sometime in the earliest hours, and now everything wore a cold white hush. The search resumed at first light. Trucks and battered sedans lined the road near the Whitcombe house. Men in heavy coats stamped their boots against the packed snow. Dogs barked and strained at their leashes. The sheriff walked among them, giving directions, marking areas on a worn map spread across the hood of his car. He spoke of ditches, fields, and the Marsh road. He gestured toward the river. "Check the bridge," he said. "Carefully." By mid-morning, a small group reached Marsh Bridge. Their footsteps crunched on the snow-covered planks. Frost sparkled along the railings, except where one section had been broken. There, splintered wood jutted upward in jagged angles like ribs. "Lord," one of the men murmured, "that was not from the storm." They examined the marks. The damaged rail told a clear story to anyone who had driven the road in winter. A car had come too fast into the curve, skidded, and struck the bridge. Maybe the driver had checked the damage, found the vehicle still drivable, and left, intending to report it later. Maybe they had panicked. There was no sign of Clara on the bridge itself, only the scattered impressions of snow packed by boots as the searching men moved about. Then one of the dogs whined. He had reached the end of the bridge and was staring down at the churning black water. The river moved slowly here most of the year, but the storm had swollen it. Broken ice and branches floated on its surface, moving with a heavy, deliberate rhythm. The dog's hackles lifted. He stepped back, then forward again, sniffing the air with an unease that spread quickly to his handler. They found Clara's red scarf near the base of the bridge, half frozen into the icy mud, as if it had been dropped or dragged. The color looked almost violent against the snow. The sheriff closed his eyes briefly. They dragged the river that afternoon. Men with lines and hooks moved methodically along the banks, faces pale beneath caps and pulled hoods. The wind knifed against their exposed hands. The ropes they cast into the water stiffened in the cold. Each time they pulled something up, hope and dread tangled in the watchers, until they saw that it was only a branch, a drowned log, a tangle of weed. Annabel did not go to the bridge that day. She could not. She remained at the house, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands folded on the wood, her breath coming shallow. The ticking clock on the wall marked each moment with a cruel regularity. Neighbors came and went, bringing coffee, soup, and carefully measured compassion. By the time the light began to thin toward evening, the sheriff came to her with snow still frozen in his hair. His expression told her the answer before his words could. "We believe Clara fell from the bridge," he said quietly. "The current was strong. If she struck her head or the water took her under quickly, there may have been nothing she could do. We will continue to search further downstream, but I do not want to give you false hope. False hope would have been kinder than certainty." Annabel listened, her face strangely still. Her mind caught on a single detail. "Have you found her body?" she asked. "No," the sheriff replied. "Not yet. The water is high, and there are many snags. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes longer. Sometimes they never come back," though he did not say it aloud. That night, when the house at last fell quiet, Annabel stood alone in the dining room. She lit a candle and placed it at Clara's place. She set a plate with a small portion of food, as if her daughter might slip in late, apologizing with a tired laugh. "Come home," she whispered. The flame trembled. Outside, the wind moved across the marsh. On the bridge, snow covered the broken rail in a smooth white curve. Underneath the ice, the river carried on. A week passed, then a month. Winter settled in fully. Nobody rose from the river. In time, stories began to stir. Some said they had seen a girl walking along the marsh road late at night, her coat too thin for the cold, her hair damp with river water. Others told of headlights catching a pale figure standing at the edge of the bridge, one hand lifted as if asking for help. The sheriff dismissed such talk as grief, twisting the town's imagination. But in the Whitcombe house, Annabel listened to each story that found its way back to her. She slept less. She dreamed more. Each dream carried the same feeling. Clara was close, but not home. The driver who had struck Clara did not live far away. His name was Michael Garrison, and on the night of the storm, he had been returning from his sister's house after a long Thanksgiving dinner that had ended in its own arguments, its own quiet disappointments. He had left later than he intended. He had drunk more than he should have. The combination of tired eyes, impatience, and slick roads formed a chain of small choices that would eventually crush him. In the first days after the accident, he told himself he had only hit the railing. He clung to that story the way a drowning man might grab anything that floated. The impact had jostled the car violently. The sound of wood breaking had been loud. For one split second, he had thought he saw a figure, but then the next moment had swallowed it. The storm had blurred everything beyond recognition. He had felt the car skid and had known with a cold clarity that if he stepped out, he might see something he could never unsee. So he gripped the wheel, slammed his foot on the accelerator, and drove away, heart pounding so hard that he could hear it over the roar of the rain. He parked behind his own barn that night and stared at the front of his car. The bumper was dented. A smear of something dark showed against the cold metal. It could have been mud. It could have been something else. The next morning he heard Clara Whitcombe's name on everyone's lips. He stood on his porch while his neighbor described the situation in a low, horrified voice. "A girl is missing. A bridge with a broken railing. The sheriff is calling for volunteers." Michael's vision tunneled. The world receded to a narrow point, where only two truths existed. He could step forward, confess, and possibly help them find her faster, or he could remain silent and hope, foolishly, that the broken pieces would never be traced back to him. Fear chose for him. He went to the search like everyone else, his flashlight beam skimming over snow and brush, pretending to look for what he already believed he had taken. When they found the scarf by the river, something inside him snapped so quietly that he almost missed it. From that day on, the Marsh Road was no longer simply a road. It became a path lined with accusations. Every time he drove past the turnoff that led toward Marsh Bridge, he felt his hands sweat against the steering wheel. At night, he jolted awake, convinced he had heard someone calling his name from outside the window. The first time he saw her, it was a year later. Thanksgiving arrived again, as stubbornly as it always did. Families returned to set tables and say grace. The Whitcombes kept Clara's place at the table, quiet but unforgotten. In town, there were fewer easy jokes that year. The holiday sat awkwardly in the middle of the week, carrying with it the memory of the girl who did not come home. Michael tried to endure it. He drove home late from the store with a last-minute bag of cranberries on the passenger seat, berating himself for having waited until the day itself. The sky had the same heavy, low clouds as the previous year. Flurries drifted down in small, hesitant movements. When he reached the stretch of road near the marsh, his headlights skimmed across the ditch, the cattails, and then the figure. A girl stood at the edge of the road, very still, as though she had been waiting there for him. She wore a light-colored coat that seemed too thin for the cold. Her hair hung damp and dark against her shoulders. Her head was slightly lowered, as if she were listening for something. Every muscle in his body turned to ice. For a moment, he considered driving past. His mind screamed at him to keep going, to let the night swallow her. But another part of him, smaller and quieter, refused to let the chance pass. Perhaps she was real. Perhaps she needed help. Perhaps fate was cruel enough to place another girl in his path so that he could learn or fail again. He slowed and pulled onto the shoulder. As he drew closer, the details sharpened. Her skin looked pale, almost translucent in the headlights. Her eyes, when she finally raised them to meet his, carried a sorrow so deep that it almost pushed him back. He rolled the window down halfway. "Do you need a ride?" he asked, his voice rough. She did not speak immediately. She only watched him, the snow gathering quietly on her hair and shoulders. Then she nodded once and walked around the front of the car to the passenger side. When she opened the door, the cabin filled with a faint smell of cold river water. She sat and folded her hands in her lap. Her coat looked dry but somehow wrong, as if the fabric remembered being soaked. A small torn place showed near the sleeve, the kind of damage that might come from splintered wood or rusted metal. Michael's breath shortened. "Where are you going?" he wanted to ask, but the words tangled. Instead, he said, "I can take you into town." Her gaze remained fixed on the road ahead. "Marsh Bridge," she said softly. "Please." His hands tightened on the wheel. For a second, he wondered if he had misheard her. Then she turned her head ever so slightly, and he saw the face he recognized from the missing posters that had once hung in the post office and the grocery store. Clara Whitcombe sat in his passenger seat. The bag of cranberries at her feet felt suddenly absurd, bright red against the dark mat. He started the engine. The radio flickered with static before he switched it off. They drove in silence, the car moving slowly along the familiar curve of the Marsh Road. The river to their right flowed unseen in the dark. "What do you want from me?" he whispered finally, though he was not sure if he had spoken aloud. She did not answer. Instead, when the bridge came into view, she straightened. Her attention sharpened like a flame feeding on oxygen. "Here," she said. He pulled onto the bridge and stopped at its midpoint. Snow swirled lazily through the beams of the headlights. The broken rail had been repaired in the months since, but the wood was a different color, new and raw against the old. She opened the door before he could speak again. "Wait," he said, turning toward her. She paused, one foot already on the cold planks. For the first time, he saw her clearly in the dim glow of the cabin light. Water glistened at the ends of her hair. A faint line of bruising showed along her temple, almost hidden by her hair. "Tell my mother I am sorry," she said. "Tell her I tried to come home." The words struck him with the force of the accident itself. "Clara," he choked, "I did this. It was me. I should have stopped. I should have helped you. I am so sorry." Her expression did not change. There was no anger in her, only a kind of exhausted grief. "Then carry it," she replied, "until you cannot." She stepped backward into the snow-filled night. For a moment she remained visible, standing near the edge of the bridge, framed by snow and darkness. Then the headlights shimmered as if passing through fog, and she was gone. The passenger seat stood empty. The faint smell of river water faded slowly. Michael sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel, tears blurring his vision. The bridge groaned faintly beneath the weight of the car, as if tired of such stories. When he finally drove home, he did not sleep. The next day he went to the sheriff. The confession came out in broken pieces, accompanied by shaking hands and a face that seemed suddenly older. The legal consequences were less severe than the ones he had already carried in silence. The storm, the late hour, and his eventual admission tempered the judgment of the court. The town, however, did not forget, and the Marsh did not forgive. Time moved forward in the stubborn way it always does, dragging people along whether they clung to it or not. Years layered themselves over Marsh Bridge like sediment, each one adding another thin film of memory. The Whitcombe family changed. Annabelle's hair went silver at the temples more quickly than it might have otherwise. Thomas walked with a stoop that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with the weight he carried. Daniel grew into a quiet young man with careful eyes, the kind of person who listened more than he spoke. Every Thanksgiving they set a place for Clara. At first the ritual was raw and nearly unbearable. The empty chair seemed to shout in the silence. Annabelle would reach for the serving spoon and find her hands shaking. Thomas would start to say his daughter's name in grace and falter in the middle. They did it anyway. To neglect that place felt worse than to face it. As the years passed, the pain changed shape. It did not lessen so much as deepen, becoming something softer but more permanent, like a river carving its bed. Other things happened. Illness came and went. Jobs were lost and found. Babies were born to cousins and friends. Still, each November, when the days shortened and the air gained that thin, bright cold, the town remembered the girl who had vanished near Marsh Bridge. Stories had grown around her, as they always do when grief has too much time and not enough answers. Some said that on Thanksgiving night, if you drove alone along the Marsh Road and left a seat open in your car, you might see a figure walking on the shoulder, head bowed against the wind. If you were kind, if you stopped and offered her a ride, she would accept and sit beside you in silence until you reached the bridge. Then she would ask to step out, and when you turned to look, she would already be gone. Others claimed that she would only appear to those who carried a secret guilt, to a drunk who had escaped earlier punishment, to a thief whose crime had never been discovered, to anyone who had wronged someone they loved and never made it right. Sometimes she was seen standing on the bridge itself, a thin, pale outline against the snow, her hair moving in a wind no one else could feel. One year, long after Michael Garrison's confession had faded from active gossip into the town's deeper lore, Daniel Whitcombe drove the Marsh Road alone, He was in his late 20s then, with his mother's eyes and his father's stubborn set to his jaw. He had spent the day at home, helping Annabel with the meal, making sure the turkey did not dry out, and distracting her with gentle conversation when her thoughts threatened to sink too far into memory. Clara's place had been set, as always. A candle burned there, its flame steady even when the furnace clicked on and sent small drafts through the room. After dinner, when the kitchen was finally clean and the leftovers neatly packed away, he had stepped outside to clear his head. The sky had that peculiar brightness that comes with new snow and clouded moonlight. The air felt sharp and clean. He told himself he was only going for a short drive to check the conditions on the back roads before the freeze deepened overnight. He did not admit, even to himself, that he had taken the Marsh road on purpose. The stretch near the bridge felt different, as it always did. The cattails stood like dark spears against the white ground. The river beside them flowed in slow, heavy movements beneath its skin of ice. As he approached, his headlights illuminated a shape near the railing. He hit the brakes before his conscious mind fully registered what he was seeing. The car slid a little, tires crunching across packed snow, then came to a careful stop. A girl stood at the midpoint of Marsh Bridge, facing the river. Her coat looked familiar in a way that made Daniel's chest ache. Her hair fell in a dark curtain down her back. She did not turn when the car stopped, but the air around her seemed to shift with awareness. Daniel's hand hovered over the door handle, then dropped. He was not sure if he wanted her to be real or not. If he stepped out and found nothing but snow and wood, perhaps he could finally put the stories to rest. If he stepped out and found her, he was not sure his heart could bear it. He lowered the window instead. "Clara," he called, his voice trembling despite his attempt to keep it steady. The figure turned. In the thin circle of the headlights, he saw his sister's face, not as it had been in the fading school portraits that still hung on the hallway wall, but with a strange, almost luminous calm. The bruises he had imagined for years along her temple were faint but visible. Her eyes carried the depth of someone who had watched far more winters than her body had lived. "Danny," she said softly. The nickname slipped through him like a knife wrapped in silk. He had not heard it spoken aloud in her voice since he was a boy. He could not move. "I tried to come home," she said. "I did not want her last words to me to be anger." "She knows," he managed. "She forgave you long ago. She blames herself, not you." Clara's gaze shifted past him, as if she could see through the windshield, through the fields, all the way to the warm square of light that marked the Whitcombe kitchen window. "She still sets my place," she murmured. "Yes," he said. "Every year." For a moment, something like longing flickered across her features. "Tell her I heard grace," Clara said. "Tell her I heard my name. That is enough." Snow drifted between them, almost gentle. "Can you not come back?" he asked, the question bursting out of him with all the weight of years. Her expression softened with a sadness that seemed too large for one human face to hold. "The river took more than my body," she replied. "Some doors once closed do not open again. But gratitude reaches further than the living believe. Remember her with kindness. Remember me as more than a ghost on a bridge." She stepped backward. The light from the headlights shimmered as if passing through water. Clara's outline faded, becoming one more shadow among many. Then she was gone, leaving only the repaired rail and the slowly falling snow. Daniel sat very still for a long time. When he finally went home, he found his mother in the dining room, standing by Clara's empty chair. The candle had burned low. Its flame flickered weakly. "I was thinking of blowing it out," Annabel said, not turning. "It has been so many years." "Keep it," Daniel said quietly, "at least for tonight." She turned then and saw something in his face that made her breath catch. "What happened?" she asked. He stepped closer and took her hands. "She knows," he said simply. "She heard you. She is sorry, and she is grateful." A tear slid down Annabel's cheek, then another. She did not ask how he knew. Some questions lose their power when love stands in front of them. The candle steadied. On Marsh Bridge, snow covered the planks and rail in a clean, unbroken sheet. For once the night did not feel quite so cold. So many of our hauntings begin with a sentence left unfinished, a goodbye unsaid, a gratitude unspoken. We imagine ghosts as angry things that claw at the living, yet more often they are echoes of love and regret that never found a voice. Clara Whitcombe did not stay because she hated the one who struck her. He carried his own punishment long before the law ever touched him. She lingered because of an unfinished conversation at a Thanksgiving table, because a mother and daughter parted with sharp words when they had meant to offer softer ones, because the human heart is very skilled at wounding itself. Every year, families gather and express their gratitude for food, for warmth, for one another. Yet how many of them leave the most important words unsaid? How many of them assume they will have another year, another holiday, another chance to mend what was broken? Sometimes you do, sometimes you do not. It would be simple to say that the story ends when the sightings fade. The watcher continued, his voice low and even. That one year, the townspeople realized no one had seen a pale girl on the Marsh Road in some time, that the bridge becomes only wood and water again, that the family finally clears the extra place from the table and moves on. But stories that root themselves in guilt and gratitude seldom end so neatly. In truth, Marsh Bridge still remembers, he said. It holds the impression of impact in its grain. It remembers the weight of a girl's body against its rail. It remembers the nights when headlights flickered to a stop and someone, trembling, chose whether to open a door or drive away. And the Whitcombe house remembers as well. The table has seen hands slam against it in anger and fold in prayer. It has borne the weight of turkeys and gravies, of childish laughter and quiet tears. Every Thanksgiving, the wood listens to the names spoken in grace and to the names left unsaid. I tell you this not to frighten you away from bridges on stormy nights, though you might still choose your roads carefully. I tell you this because there is a kind of haunting you can avoid. Say what must be said while you still can. Offer your apology before the car door closes and the storm rises. Speak your gratitude while the chair is still warm from the one you love. You may not be able to keep ghosts from forming in the marshes and rivers of the world, but you can keep some from forming in your own heart. Some stories refuse to stay buried. This one, at least, has learned to stand between worlds with something like peace. Until the next telling, remember your bridges, remember your tables, and remember that the dead are not always the only ones who wander.